All through her life, Saint Jane, also known as Joan, wanted to please Christ, to give him joy. With all her being, she drew from the love of God and Mary, constantly contemplating the mysteries of the Blessed Virgin Mary. In Mary's example, she lived out the Annunciation and strove to fulfill God's will in all life events. The second daughter of Louis XI, King of France, and Charlotte of Savoy, she was born on April 23rd, 1464. Joan's father hated her from birth, partly because of her sex and partly because she was sickly and deformed. Joan had a hump on her back and walked with a limp. Even as a child, she had a great love for the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus. She spent long hours in a small side chapel of the church. The little girl longed for one thing only, to please the Queen of Heaven. She was merely 7 when she asked Mary in a prayer in what manner she could please her best, and in her heart she received the answer. Before you die, you shall find the order in my honor. This is the greatest pleasure that you can give to my son and myself. Joan kept this annunciation in her heart, devoting herself entirely to God. When she was just 2 months old, she was betrothed to Louis, Duke of Orleans, and the marriage took place in 1476 when she turned 12. The marriage was forced upon Louis and was never consummated. The Duke hated the fact that she was imposed on him in the marriage, and even publicly insulted and humiliated her. Nevertheless, Joan tried to make the best of her marriage. He always treated Joan of Valois as a stranger, and if he ever permitted her to appear before him, he reproached and ill-treated her. She remained a devoted and faithful wife for 22 years. Joan saved her husband's life when her brother, King Charles VIII, decided to execute him for rebellion. When her husband ascended to the throne as Louis XII, Joan became empress. But the Duke wanted to marry Anne of Brittany, and he had Pope Alexander VI declare his marriage to Joan null. Joan offered no objections and accepted the situation with the patience that marked her entire life. God has now detached me from the world and has made it possible for me to serve him better than heretofore. The annulment liberated Jane to move forward with her desire to live a religious life. Joan did not close in on herself. She did not become centered on herself or her misery or her sufferings. Instead, she turned to Christ and sought in him the solace and meaning of these events. She drew her strength from him. She united a group of young women to form a religious community which would devote itself to the special veneration of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Her regular confessor, Father Gilbert, drew up the statutes, which treat in 10 chapters on imitating the 10 virtues of the Blessed Virgin, to wit, the chastity, prudence, humility, faith, obedience, compassion, devotion, poverty, patience, and piety of Mary. The members of her community devoted themselves to prayer, penance, and cultivating the virtues of the Blessed Mother. In 1501, The rule of the Annunciation was finally approved by Alexander VI. The chief aim of the Institute was to imitate the 10 virtues practiced by Our Lady in the mystery of the Incarnation. Its superior was called Ancel, handmade in honor of Mary's humility. Saint Joan built and endowed the first convent of the order in 1502. Joan herself took the veil in the convent of Bourges, which she had built, and on Pentecost 1503, she pronounced her solemn vows. Having for so long a time been prepared in the school of suffering and humiliation, she soon reached the summit of religious perfection and was ripe for heaven. She died in heroic sanctity 1505 and was buried in the royal crown and purple, beneath which lay the habit of her order. Saint Joan's misfortune turned out to be the source of blessing and her spiritual growth. She teaches us that our every imperfection, failure, humiliation, and rejection, as well as the ensuing loneliness, suffering, and setback, are the opportunities of meeting God, uniting with Him, and growing in His love. Shortly after her death in 1505, miracles and healings were attributed to her. In the year 1562, the heretical Huguenots stormed the city of Bourges. The convent and the church of the Annunciatus were plundered and destroyed. They tore Jane's body, which was still incorrupt, out of the vault, and when they pierced it with swords, blood flowed from the wounds. The holy body was then burned. Pope Benedict XIV sanctioned the public veneration of Jane in the year 1742, and in 1950 she was declared a saint. The life of Saint Joan is primarily a testimony of faith that can strengthen and encourage us to persevere with God and the Mother of Jesus, despite all adversities and resistance to good. Saint Joan's feast day is February 4th. She is the patron of those in difficult circumstances. This prayer, left to us by Saint Joan, invites us through Mary to entrust ourselves completely to God, to adapt to His plan, and please Him in all things. O Mary, Virgin and Mother of Jesus, grant that I think, say, and do all that is most pleasing to God and to you.